Jasmine's dream. Oakwood High School, a melting pot of diverse backgrounds and perspectives, buzzed with energy as the school day ended. Among the crowd of students eager to break free from the confines of their classrooms was Jasmine Carter, a 16-year-old girl with dreams bigger than the boundaries of her hometown. With her deep brown eyes and confident stride, Jasmine was not just another face in the sea of students. She was a young woman on a mission. Jasmine's mind wasn't on the usual teenage concerns. While her classmates talked about parties and social media trends, she was focused on a plan that had been brewing for weeks. Inspired by her dream of becoming a doctor and helping those in need, she had decided to set up a lemonade stand over the weekend. But this wasn't just any lemonade stand. Every dollar she earned would go towards supporting healthcare for children with disabilities in her community, a cause close to her heart. She thought of her father, Marcus Carter, a figure of quiet strength in her life. Though she knew he worked for the government, she'd never been entirely sure what he did. Her friends liked to speculate, weaving stories about secret missions and high-stakes encounters. But Jasmine had learned long ago that her father's job was shrouded in discretion. What she did know, however, was that he cared deeply about justice and integrity, values he had instilled in her from a young age. On her way home, Jasmine's path took her past the local community center, a place filled with memories. She had spent countless hours volunteering there, tutoring younger children and assisting with after-school programs. It was here that she first felt the call to make a difference, to help others rise above the challenges life threw their way. The center's faded sign and peeling paint saddened her, and the thought of using her lemonade stand to help fund repairs filled her with pride. Determined to make a meaningful impact, she pushed open the heavy doors of the center. Inside, she found Miss Thompson, the tireless director who was trying to juggle paperwork while managing a group of lively children. When she saw Jasmine, her face lit up with a warm smile. "Jasmine, what a pleasant surprise. How's my favorite volunteer?" Miss Thompson greeted her. Jasmine grinned. "I'm doing well, Miss Thompson. I actually wanted to talk to you about something." She took a breath, her voice filled with excitement. "I'm setting up a lemonade stand this weekend, and I'd love to donate the proceeds to the community center. Maybe we can fix that leaky roof in the art room or buy some new books for the reading program." Miss Thompson's eyes welled up with tears. "Oh, Jasmine, that's such a kind offer. The kids will be so grateful. It's people like you who keep this place alive." Jasmine left the center with her heart full of purpose. Her lemonade stand was no longer just a school project. It was her way of giving back to the place and the people who had shaped her. As she walked home, she felt her resolve strengthen. This was her first step toward creating the future she dreamed of, a future where she could make a difference. But her determination was not without challenges. She thought about her friend Lena, whose family was struggling to make ends meet. She had hoped Lena might help her with the lemonade stand. But she understood when her friend declined, too burdened by family responsibilities to spare any time. Jasmine felt a pang of loneliness as she realized she'd be handling the stand alone, but her father's words echoed in her mind, reminding her of the importance of resilience and independence. The evening before her lemonade stand was to open, Jasmine sat down with her father at the kitchen table, seeking his advice. She explained her plan, her voice brimming with enthusiasm, but she noticed a flicker of concern in his eyes. "Jasmine," he began gently, "you know the world isn't always fair. There may be people who won't understand what you're trying to do, people who will judge you without even knowing you. If that happens, remember who you are and what you stand for. Speak clearly, don't let them intimidate you. And if you need me, call. No matter what, I'll be there." Jasmine nodded, absorbing his words with a mixture of pride and apprehension. Her father had always taught her the importance of standing her ground, of speaking up for herself, but this was the first time he seemed genuinely concerned for her safety. She hugged him tightly, feeling the strength in his embrace, and promised herself that she would face whatever came her way with courage. The next morning dawned bright and clear, the perfect day for a lemonade stand. Jasmine set up her small table on the corner of Main Street, a well-traveled spot where she hoped to attract plenty of customers. She draped a cheerful yellow cloth over the table and set out a pitcher of freshly squeezed lemonade, along with a stack of paper cups and a hand-painted sign that read, "Lemonade for CHARITY, $1, help support healthcare for disabled children." As she stood there, her heart raced with a mixture of excitement and nerves. She called out to passers-by, her voice bright and confident, "Fresh lemonade. Support a great cause. Just $1." The first few customers were neighbors, friends, and familiar faces from the community. They praised her for her initiative, dropping extra dollars into her collection jar and offering words of encouragement. Jasmine's heart swelled with pride as she realized she was truly making a difference, however small. But as the morning wore on, a group of older boys approached her stand. She recognized them from school. They were on the football team and had a reputation for being troublemakers. Her heart sank as they swaggered up to her table, their expressions mocking. "Well, well, well," the tallest boy sneered, eyeing her lemonade stand with a smirk. "Look who's playing little businesswoman, trying to save the world with a lemonade stand." Jasmine straightened her shoulders, meeting their gaze with quiet confidence. "That's right. Every dollar helps. Would you like to buy a cup?" The boys exchanged glances, clearly taken aback by her composure. One of them scoffed, holding up a clipboard. "We're raising money, too, for new uniforms, but at least we're doing something useful, not wasting money on charity cases." Jasmine felt a surge of anger at his words, but she kept her voice steady. "I think helping people who need health care is pretty useful. Everyone deserves a chance to live a healthy life." The boys shuffled uncomfortably, their bravado faltering in the face of her unwavering resolve. After a moment of awkward silence, they moved on, muttering under their breaths. Jasmine watched them go, feeling a mixture of pride and relief. She had stood her ground, just as her father had taught her. As the day went on, Jasmine continued to attract customers, her jar filling with donations. But her success did not go unnoticed. Across town, Police Chief Ryan Callahan, a man whose views were rooted in the past, had received complaints about unauthorized activities near Main Street. Already frustrated by what he saw as the town's changing demographics, he decided to make an example of Jasmine's lemonade stand. With a grim determination, Callahan climbed into his patrol car and headed toward Main Street, a growing resentment building within him. He saw Jasmine's stand not as a charitable endeavor, but as a symbol of everything he resented: change, diversity, and a future that didn't include his outdated values. By the time he arrived, Jasmine was busy serving an elderly woman, her bright smile reflecting the joy she felt in making a difference. Callahan stepped out of his car, his face set in a hard line, and approached her stand. "Excuse me, young lady," he barked, his voice cold and commanding. "Do you have a permit to operate this stand?" Jasmine's smile faded as she looked up at the stern figure looming over her. She felt a twinge of fear, but quickly reminded herself of her father's words. Standing up straight, she replied, "I didn't know I needed a permit, sir. I'm just raising money for charity." Callahan's expression hardened. "Ignorance of the law is no excuse. You're obstructing public space without authorization. Pack up your things, or I'll have to take action." Jasmine's heart pounded, but she forced herself to speak calmly. "Sir, I'm just trying to help people. This money is going to the community center and health care for children." Callahan's eyes narrowed. "That's not my concern. This is an unauthorized business, and you're in violation of city ordinances." Jasmine felt a surge of anger and helplessness, but she knew arguing would only make things worse. She began to gather her things, fighting back tears. But as she did, a familiar car pulled up, and out stepped her father, Marcus, his face a mask of quiet fury. Callahan's smug expression faltered as he realized who had arrived. Marcus Carter wasn't just any concerned parent. He was a high-ranking government official with influence that stretched far beyond the borders of their small town. and he had no intention of letting his daughter's act of kindness be crushed by prejudice and intimidation. In that moment, Jasmine's stand became more than a simple fundraiser. It became the battleground for justice, a confrontation that would reveal the depths of Marcus's resolve and the lengths he would go to protect his daughter's dreams. Marcus stands his ground. As Jasmine packed up her lemonade stand, the weight of injustice pressed down on her. She had spent weeks planning, gathering supplies, and promoting her stand, all for it to be shut down in a matter of minutes. Her hands trembled as she placed the cups back in the box, but she fought to keep her composure. Her father's words echoed in her mind, reminding her to stay calm, even when faced with those who sought to belittle her efforts. Marcus Carter watched from a few steps away, his expression unreadable, but his jaw set in a grim line. He hadn't anticipated that his daughter's simple act of charity would turn into a confrontation with the town's police chief, a man whose reputation for prejudice was well known. As he took in the sight of Chief Ryan Callahan looming over Jasmine, an icy rage simmered beneath his calm exterior. This was his daughter, a young girl with dreams of making the world a better place, and he refused to let her be treated this way. Callahan, seeing Marcus approach, shifted uncomfortably. He recognized Marcus immediately. Everyone in Oakwood knew who he was. Although Marcus had always kept a low profile, his role in federal government operations had occasionally brought him into the public eye. His mere presence carried a weight of authority, and Callahan could feel it. But the chief, stubborn and set in his ways, masked his discomfort with a forced bravado. "Is there a problem here, Chief Callahan?" Marcus's voice was calm, but there was an edge to it that made the chief hesitate. Callahan squared his shoulders, trying to reassert his dominance. "Your daughter was operating an unauthorized business on public property. I'm simply enforcing city regulations." Marcus glanced at Jasmine, who looked back at him with an expression that mixed defiance and hurt. He turned his gaze back to Callahan, his eyes cold. "She's a 16-year-old girl selling lemonade for charity. I'm sure there are more pressing matters for you to attend to, Chief." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken tension. Callahan's face flushed, his pride stung by the thinly veiled reprimand. He took a step closer, his voice lowering. "Rules are rules, Mr. Carter. Just because someone has good intentions doesn't mean they're exempt from the law." Marcus held his gaze, unflinching. And perhaps enforcing those rules should involve a measure of discretion, especially when it comes to young people trying to do some good in the world. She was raising money for the community center and health care for children, not causing trouble. But Callahan wasn't willing to back down. He had spent years asserting his authority over the town, and he wasn't about to let Marcus, or anyone else, undermine him. "You're teaching her the wrong lesson, Mr. Carter," he replied, his voice laced with barely concealed disdain. "If she wants to operate within this town, she needs to follow the rules like everyone else." At that moment, Jasmine, who had been quietly observing the exchange, spoke up. Her voice was steady, though her heart was racing. "I didn't know I needed a permit. If I did, I would have gotten one. I'm just trying to help people." Callahan's eyes snapped to her, his irritation clear. "That's irrelevant. The law is the law, young lady, and you don't get to ignore it just because you have good intentions." Jasmine opened her mouth to respond, but her father gently placed a hand on her shoulder, signaling her to let him handle it. He stepped forward, closing the gap between himself and Callahan. "Chief," Marcus began, his tone measured but firm, "my daughter is not some troublemaker. She's a bright, ambitious young woman who has done more for this community than most people twice her age. I'd suggest you rethink how you're handling this situation." For a moment, Callahan faltered, the weight of Marcus's words pressing down on him, but his pride refused to let him relent. With a sneer, he replied, "This town doesn't need outside influence telling us how to handle our affairs. If your daughter can't respect the rules, then maybe she shouldn't be here at all." Jasmine's eyes widened at the veiled threat, but Marcus's expression remained calm, though a dangerous glint appeared in his eyes. He leaned in, his voice low enough that only Callahan could hear. "Careful, Chief. You're walking a very fine line. And I assure you, my family has every right to be here. If you can't respect that, then perhaps you're the one who shouldn't be in this position." The subtle warning struck a nerve. Callahan's face turned an even deeper shade of red, but before he could respond, a small crowd began to gather around them. Neighbors who had come out to buy lemonade from Jasmine were now watching the confrontation with curious, concerned expressions. Some murmured in support of Jasmine, while others cast disapproving glances at Callahan, wondering why he was making such a big deal out of the lemonade stand. Sensing that he was losing control of the situation, Callahan forced a tight-lipped smile. "Well, Mr. Carter, if your daughter wants to continue her little venture, she can apply for a permit at the town hall. Until then, this stand remains shut down." Without waiting for a response, he turned on his heel and walked back to his patrol car, his movements stiff with barely contained anger. Marcus watched him go, his face impassive, but Jasmine could see the tension in his shoulders. As soon as Callahan was out of sight, Jasmine let out a shaky breath, her emotions finally catching up with her. "Dad, I didn't mean for this to happen. I just wanted to help." Marcus turned to her, his expression softening. He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You did nothing wrong, Jasmine. You stood up for yourself, and I'm proud of you for that. But sometimes standing up for what's right means facing people who don't see the world the same way." Jasmine nodded, her eyes filling with determination. "I'm not giving up, Dad. I'll go to town hall and get that permit if I have to. I won't let him scare me." Marcus smiled, his pride evident. "That's my girl. And don't worry. You're not alone in this. I'll be with you every step of the way." The next morning, Jasmine and Marcus went to the town hall, where they encountered the usual bureaucratic hurdles. The clerk, a middle-aged woman who seemed indifferent to their cause, informed them that the permit would take several days to process. Jasmine's frustration grew, but her father reminded her to stay patient. "Sometimes the system is designed to make things difficult," Marcus explained as they left the building. "But persistence is a powerful tool. We'll keep pushing until they have no choice but to listen." Meanwhile, word of Jasmine's encounter with Chief Callahan had spread throughout the community. Neighbors, friends, and even a few local businesses voiced their support for her, some offering to donate to her cause directly. The local newspaper picked up the story, featuring an article about the girl with the lemonade stand who stood up to injustice. Jasmine's story became a symbol of hope, a beacon for others in the town who had felt marginalized or overlooked. As the days passed, Jasmine's determination only grew. With her father's encouragement, she began writing about her experience, documenting her feelings and the lessons she had learned. She posted her story online, where it quickly gained traction. People from outside Oakwood began to comment, sharing their own stories of standing up to authority and offering words of encouragement. Jasmine realized that her lemonade stand had sparked something much bigger than she had anticipated. By the time the town hall finally approved her permit, Jasmine had garnered a wave of support that even Chief Callahan couldn't ignore. Her story had reached the local news station, and they sent a reporter to interview her about her plans. Nervous but determined, Jasmine spoke confidently, explaining why she had set up the lemonade stand and why she refused to back down in the face of intimidation. "It's not just about selling lemonade," she told the reporter. "It's about showing people that no matter how young you are, you have the power to make a difference. I want to help my community, and I won't let anyone take that away from me." The interview aired that evening, and the response was overwhelming. People from all walks of life reached out to show their support, sending donations, messages of encouragement, and even small gifts to show solidarity. Jasmine's simple act of selling lemonade had become a movement, a rallying cry for justice and resilience. Meanwhile, Chief Callahan was feeling the pressure. His superiors had taken note of the public outcry, and the mayor himself had questioned the necessity of shutting down a charity lemonade stand. Rumors circulated that the chief was being investigated for his handling of the situation, and Callahan's position grew increasingly precarious. For the first time, he realized that his actions had consequences, and that his authority was not as untouchable as he had believed. The next Saturday, with her permit in hand, Jasmine set up her lemonade stand once again. This time, a crowd of supporters gathered around her, cheering her on and buying cup after cup of lemonade. Marcus stood beside her, his heart swelling with pride as he watched his daughter in action. She had not only raised money for charity, but had also inspired an entire community to stand together. As Jasmine poured lemonade, she spotted Chief Callahan watching from across the street, his face a mixture of anger and defeat. Their eyes met, and for a moment, Jasmine felt a surge of triumph. She had faced him head-on and emerged stronger. He may have tried to silence her, but she had found her voice, and so had her community. In that moment, Jasmine knew that this was only the beginning. Her father's lessons had taken root, and her own courage had blossomed. She was no longer just a girl with a lemonade stand. She was a force for change, and her journey was far from over. The ripple effect. Jasmine's stand had been up and running for several hours when a steady stream of visitors, including friends, neighbors, and even strangers, continued to arrive. They lined up to buy a cup of lemonade, not only supporting her cause but standing in solidarity with her. The entire street buzzed with energy, the spirit of unity igniting a sense of purpose that could be felt in the air. Every cup poured and every dollar collected was more than just a transaction. It was a statement against injustice, a testament to resilience. Jasmine was overwhelmed by the outpouring of support. People stopped by not just to buy lemonade, but to share words of encouragement, telling her how much her courage inspired them. She smiled warmly at each person, thanking them as she handed over their cups. She noticed kids from her school, teachers, and even some of the business owners from around town who had come to show their support. Among the crowd was Mrs. Thompson, the director of the community center. Her eyes shone with pride as she approached Jasmine's stand. "Look at all these people, Jasmine. You've brought the whole town together." Jasmine beamed, grateful for the kind words. "Thank you, Mrs. Thompson. I just wanted to help the center, but it turned into something so much bigger." Mrs. Thompson nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Sometimes, the smallest actions can have the biggest impact. You're showing everyone here that they don't need to be afraid to stand up for what's right." As Mrs. Thompson walked away, Jasmine felt a renewed sense of purpose. Her lemonade stand had become more than a fundraiser. It had sparked a conversation about fairness, about the power of standing up to authority, and about the importance of believing in oneself. Yet, not everyone was thrilled by Jasmine's success. Across town, Chief Ryan Callahan seethed as he read the latest article about her in the Oakwood Gazette. The piece praised Jasmine as a young activist and called her lemonade stand a symbol of hope and resilience. It highlighted how her story had reached far beyond Oakwood, drawing attention from nearby cities and even state representatives. The Gazette hinted at shifts in leadership priorities in the local police force, suggesting that Callahan's actions had cast him in a controversial light. Callahan crumpled the paper in frustration, tossing it onto his desk. His position had been secure for years, and he had prided himself on his no-nonsense, old-school approach to law enforcement. But now, because of a 16-year-old girl selling lemonade, his authority was being questioned, and he felt his grip on the town loosening. He couldn't stand the thought of being undermined, especially by someone as young and outspoken as Jasmine. Determined to reassert his control, Callahan decided to escalate the situation. He called a meeting with a few of his senior officers, intending to address the so-called problem Jasmine's stand was causing. But as he spoke, some of the officers shifted uncomfortably, their expressions suggesting discomfort rather than loyalty. One officer, Sergeant Janie Mills, finally spoke up, her voice steady but filled with conviction. "Chief, with all due respect, Jasmine's stand isn't hurting anyone. She's raising money for a good cause, and she has a permit now. We've received a lot of positive feedback from the community about her efforts. Callahan's face turned red. Mills, that's irrelevant. We're here to uphold the law, not let some teenager turn the town into a circus. Sergeant Mills held his gaze, refusing to back down. Sir, she's within her rights. I think the town has made it clear that they support her. Maybe it's time to let this go. Callahan clenched his jaw, frustrated by what he saw as a lack of respect for his authority. Let this go. So now we're just going to let kids run the town. This is about setting an example, about enforcing discipline. The room fell silent, his words hanging in the air. But the officers exchanged glances, their loyalty to Callahan beginning to waver. They had joined the force to serve and protect, not to enforce petty rules on teenagers selling lemonade. Callahan could see the doubt in their eyes, and it only fueled his determination to act. Dismissed, he barked, storming out of the room. But as he walked away, he couldn't shake the feeling that his grip on the department and the town was slipping. Back at Jasmine's stand, the day continued in a flurry of support and excitement. As the sun began to dip low in the sky, Marcus noticed a familiar figure approaching. Officer Malcolm Green. The younger officer had been in the patrol car with Callahan during the initial confrontation and had witnessed the chief's behavior firsthand. As he approached, he removed his cap, his expression respectful but uneasy. "Mr. Carter," he greeted Marcus, then nodded to Jasmine. "I just wanted to come by and say, I admire what you're doing here, Jasmine, standing up for something that matters." Jasmine looked at him, surprised but pleased. "Thank you, Officer Green. I just thought it was the right thing to do." Officer Green shifted uncomfortably, as if weighing his words. "Look, I don't agree with everything that's happened. The chief, he has his way of doing things, and sometimes those ways aren't fair." Marcus crossed his arms, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Then why don't you do something about it, Officer Green?" Green looked down, visibly conflicted. "It's not that simple, but maybe it's time we start speaking up. Just know that not all of us feel the way he does. And Jasmine, if you ever need anything, you've got allies. Remember that." Jasmine smiled, her heart warming at the unexpected show of support. She hadn't realized just how many people were rooting for her, even within the police department. As Officer Green walked away, Marcus placed a reassuring hand on Jasmine's shoulder. "See, Jasmine, when you stand up for what's right, you inspire others to do the same. Sometimes, people just need a little push to find their courage." But Jasmine's stand and the media attention it had garnered didn't just inspire support. It also drew criticism. In the days that followed, anonymous messages began circulating on local forums and social media, accusing Jasmine of disrupting the community and undermining authority. Some posts claimed she was being used by adults with political agendas. Others suggested she was disrespectful and needed to learn her place. Jasmine read these comments late one night, her heart sinking as she scrolled through the hateful messages. She had known that standing up for something important would come with challenges, but she hadn't expected the backlash to feel so personal, so hurtful. Tears welled up in her eyes as she read the accusations, the doubts, the hurtful words. Marcus found her sitting on her bed, staring at her phone, and immediately sensed her distress. He sat down beside her, gently taking the phone from her hands. "What's wrong, Jasmine?" They're saying awful things. Dad," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "People think I'm just causing trouble, that I'm being disrespectful. I was only trying to help." Marcus wrapped his arm around her, his voice calm and steady. "Jasmine, listen to me. There will always be people who try to tear you down when you're doing something important. Sometimes people are afraid of change, afraid of seeing others challenge the status quo. But that doesn't make what you're doing any less meaningful." Jasmine leaned into her father's embrace, drawing strength from his words. It hurts. I didn't think people would hate me for this." He held her tightly, his voice a gentle reassurance. Hate is just fear in disguise. Jasmine, you've shown courage, and that frightens some people, but you've also inspired countless others. Remember that for every voice trying to tear you down, there are dozens more who believe in you. Don't let the negativity drown out the support. Jasmine nodded, wiping her tears. She knew he was right. If she wanted to make a difference, she would have to face resistance, and she would have to be resilient. That night, she made a promise to herself. She would not let fear or hatred deter her from her mission. The next day, Jasmine returned to her stand, her determination stronger than ever. The crowd was smaller than before, but the support was just as genuine. People brought their children, teaching them about kindness and courage. Some even shared their own stories of standing up to authority, reinforcing the idea that one person's courage could inspire change in others. As Jasmine poured a cup of lemonade for a young mother and her son, she noticed Callahan's patrol car parked a few blocks away, watching. His presence was a silent threat, a reminder that he was still there, still watching, still clinging to his authority. But Jasmine refused to be intimidated. She straightened her shoulders, meeting his gaze from across the street, letting him know that she wasn't backing down. In the days that followed, Jasmine's story continued to spread, reaching even wider audiences through local news and social media. Her courage inspired others to share their own experiences with injustice, sparking conversations about change within the community. The town council began receiving letters from residents calling for an investigation into the police chief's actions, demanding accountability and fairness. And within the police department, officers like Sergeant Mills and Officer Green quietly rallied together, building a coalition of those who believed in protecting the community, not just enforcing arbitrary authority. Callahan's grip on the department began to weaken as more people voiced their support for Jasmine's cause, a cause that was no longer just about a lemonade stand. It was about the right to be treated with respect and dignity. As for Jasmine, she continued to run her stand with pride, her head held high. She knew there would be more battles to face, but she also knew she was not alone. Her father's support, the encouragement from her community, and the fire within her heart had created a ripple effect, one that would bring lasting change to Oakwood. And as she poured another cup of lemonade, she felt a surge of hope, knowing that sometimes even the smallest acts of courage could change the world. A community united. Days turned into weeks, and Jasmine's lemonade stand continued to be a beacon of hope in Oakwood. What had started as a small act of charity had blossomed into a movement, drawing support from all corners of the town. People who had once been strangers came together, united by a shared belief in justice and the right to be treated with dignity. The atmosphere around her stand was more than just cheerful, it was charged with purpose, a quiet rebellion against intolerance. The media coverage had turned Jasmine into a local hero. Reporters visited her stand regularly, and her story had even caught the attention of a statewide news station, which sent a crew to document her efforts. With each interview, Jasmine spoke with calm conviction, emphasizing her commitment to helping her community and the values her father had instilled in her: courage, resilience, and the importance of standing up for what's right. Meanwhile, the situation was becoming more complicated for Chief Callahan. The constant media attention and public support for Jasmine had turned the spotlight on him, and his actions were now under scrutiny. His approach had once been unquestioned, but now the people of Oakwood were beginning to challenge his authority. They demanded answers, questioning why a police chief would go out of his way to intimidate a young girl selling lemonade for charity. Callahan was feeling the pressure. His superiors were receiving complaints, and whispers of an internal investigation circulated within the department. Officers like Sergeant Mills and Officer Green had begun to push back against his heavy-handed methods, advocating for a more compassionate approach to policing. They argued that the police force should be a part of the community, not an adversary, and that Callahan's obsession with control was harming the department's reputation. In the midst of this turmoil, Callahan found himself increasingly isolated. He resented the changes happening around him, seeing them as threats to his authority and the traditional values he had long held. In his eyes, Jasmine and her supporters were part of a movement that sought to dismantle everything he stood for. But he refused to back down. He believed he was doing what was necessary to maintain order, and he saw himself as the last line of defense against a world that no longer respected him. One day, as Jasmine was serving lemonade to a group of children, she noticed a figure approaching her stand. It was Lena, her old friend who had initially declined to help with the stand due to family obligations. Lena looked hesitant but determined, her gaze meeting Jasmine's with a mix of guilt and admiration. "Hey, Jay," Lena said softly, using Jasmine's childhood nickname. "I know I wasn't there for you in the beginning, and I'm really sorry. I didn't think it was such a big deal at first, but now I see how much it means to you, and to everyone." Jasmine smiled warmly, reaching out to give her friend a reassuring hug. "It's okay, Lena. I know things have been hard for you, but you're here now, and that's what matters." Lena nodded, her eyes shining with gratitude. "If you still need help, I'd love to be part of this." "Of course," Jasmine exclaimed, handing her a spare apron. "Welcome to the team." With Lena by her side, Jasmine's stand took on a new energy. The two friends worked seamlessly together, laughing and chatting as they served lemonade to an ever-growing line of customers. Lena's presence reminded Jasmine of the strength that came from community and friendship. It was a reminder that even when people seemed distant, they could still find their way back to each other. As the day wore on, a few more friends from school joined them, volunteering to help and showing their support. Some brought homemade posters that read "Justice for Jasmine" and "Support Oakwood's Youth," while others simply lent a hand, taking turns pouring lemonade and chatting with customers. Together, they transformed the stand into a lively, bustling hub of activity and solidarity. Marcus watched the scene from a distance, his heart swelling with pride. His daughter's quiet courage had inspired an entire town, and he couldn't have been prouder. He approached Jasmine during a lull in the crowd, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You're making a difference, Jasmine," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "I hope you know that." Jasmine looked up at him, her eyes shining with gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you, Dad. You taught me to stand up for what's right." Marcus smiled, but his expression grew serious. "I want you to remember something, Jasmine. Standing up for yourself is important, but standing together, that's where real change happens. Look around you. These people are here because you showed them it's okay to fight for justice, but they're staying because they believe in you." Jasmine took in the sight of her friends and neighbors, all working together for a shared cause. She felt a surge of pride and humility, realizing that her small act of kindness had grown into something far greater than she had ever imagined. But even as the community rallied around her, not everyone was on her side. One afternoon, while she was serving a group of elderly women, she noticed a man lingering at the edge of the crowd. He was tall, with a stern expression, and an air of disdain that made her uneasy. He watched her with a look of disapproval, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. After a moment, he approached her stand, his gaze cold and assessing. "So you're the girl who thinks she can bend the rules just because people feel sorry for her?" Jasmine's heart pounded, but she kept her voice steady. "I'm just trying to help my community, sir." He sneered, his tone dripping with contempt. "Helping your community? This is nothing more than a publicity stunt. You've stirred up trouble, drawn attention to yourself, and now you're basking in it. You're a child. You don't know anything about the real world." Jasmine felt a surge of anger, but forced herself to remain calm. She remembered her father's advice to speak clearly and not let anyone rattle her. "I know that people deserve to be treated with respect and fairness, and I know that everyone has the right to stand up for what they believe in." The man scoffed, clearly unimpressed. "You're going to regret this one day. The world isn't as forgiving as you think." Before Jasmine could respond, Marcus stepped forward, his expression hard as he placed himself between Jasmine and the man. "I think it's time for you to leave," he said firmly. The man glared at Marcus, but something in Marcus's gaze made him falter. Without another word, he turned and walked away, his shoulders stiff with anger. Marcus watched him go, his protective instincts on high alert. "Are you okay, Jasmine?" he asked, turning to his daughter. She nodded, though her hands trembled slightly. "I'm fine, Dad. People like him, they're just trying to scare me." Marcus's face softened. "I know, sweetheart, but you did the right thing. Don't ever let anyone make you doubt yourself." The encounter left a sour taste in Jasmine's mouth, but she pushed the negativity aside, focusing instead on the support around her. She realized that for every person who tried to tear her down, there were dozens more lifting her up. Her community had become her shield, a network of people who believed in her cause and were willing to stand beside her. As the days went by, the community's support only grew stronger. Local businesses donated supplies, and some even pledged to match the funds Jasmine raised. Volunteers from all over town offered their time, and soon, the lemonade stand became a full-fledged event, with live music, food stalls, and activities for children. It was no longer just about raising money for charity. It had become a celebration of unity and resilience. One evening, as the sun began to set, Jasmine stood back and watched the scene with a sense of awe. She saw people of all ages and backgrounds coming together, laughing, talking, and sharing stories. She realized that her lemonade stand had become a symbol of something far greater than herself. It was a testament to the power of community, of standing together against adversity. But the celebration was not without challenges. Chief Callahan, feeling his authority slip further with each passing day, decided to escalate his efforts to shut Jasmine down. He filed a formal complaint with the town council, accusing Jasmine of disturbing the peace and operating a business without proper permits. His complaint demanded that the town council revoke her permit and disband her stand immediately. The council members, however, were deeply divided. Some sympathized with Callahan, believing that rules were rules and that Jasmine's actions had stirred up too much controversy. But others saw the complaint as a petty attempt to quash a movement that had brought the community together. They recognized that Jasmine's stand was about more than just selling lemonade. It was about justice, equality, and the right to make a difference. The town council scheduled a public hearing, inviting Jasmine, Marcus, and Chief Callahan to present their arguments. The news spread quickly, and by the day of the hearing, the entire community had turned out to show their support. The town hall was packed with people, some holding signs that read, "Stand with Jasmine," and "Justice for Oakwood." The atmosphere was tense but hopeful, a testament to the power of Jasmine's story. Jasmine sat beside her father, her heart pounding as she waited for the hearing to begin. She looked around at the faces in the crowd, her friends, her teachers, the people who had come to her stand, and felt a surge of courage. She wasn't alone in this fight. Her community had her back. As the council called the hearing to order, Jasmine took a deep breath, preparing herself for the moment she would take the stand. She knew that whatever happened next, she had already won in so many ways. She had shown her community the power of resilience, the importance of standing up for what was right, and the strength that came from unity. And as she rose to speak, she felt the weight of her father's hand on her shoulder, grounding her, reminding her that she was not just one voice. She was the voice of a community, and together they would fight for justice, no matter what it took. The hearing. The atmosphere inside Oakwood's town hall was electric. The room was filled to capacity, with people spilling into the hallway and gathering outside, hoping to catch a glimpse of the hearing that had become the talk of the town. The quiet suburban community had been thrust into the spotlight, all because a 16-year-old girl had the audacity to stand up to authority, to defend her right to make a difference. What had started as a small act of charity had become a movement that demanded the attention of everyone in Oakwood and beyond. Jasmine sat in the front row beside her father, her hands clasped tightly together in her lap. Despite the tension in the air, she felt strangely calm. She had prepared herself for this moment, for the chance to speak not only for herself, but for everyone who believed in justice and fairness. Her father's steady presence beside her reminded her of the strength she had drawn from his guidance. This wasn't just about her lemonade stand anymore. It was about the principles her father had instilled in her, the courage to stand firm in the face of adversity. At the front of the room sat the town council members, a mix of men and women who wore expressions ranging from curiosity to concern. Some looked skeptical, while others glanced at Jasmine with quiet admiration. In the center of the council's table was Mayor Louise Everly, a middle-aged woman known for her fair-minded approach and dedication to community values. She had a reputation for being just, and Jasmine could see the sympathy in her eyes as she looked over the crowded room. Across from Jasmine, seated at a table beside his lawyer, was Chief Callahan. His face was a mask of indifference, but Jasmine noticed the way his fingers tapped restlessly on the table, betraying his agitation. She could feel his hostility from where she sat, his resentment at being challenged by someone he viewed as a mere child. To him, this was an affront to his authority, a blow to his carefully constructed world where he controlled everything and everyone. The murmurs in the room quieted as Mayor Everly cleared her throat, signaling the start of the hearing. She glanced down at her notes before addressing the room. "We are here today to address a formal complaint filed by Police Chief Ryan Callahan regarding the activities of Jasmine Carter and her lemonade stand. This complaint alleges that Ms. Carter's stand has been operating without the proper permits, has caused disturbances to the peace, and has created an environment of insubordination within the community." There were murmurs of disapproval from the crowd, but the mayor raised her hand to silence them. "We will give both parties an opportunity to present their cases. I ask everyone to remain respectful and to allow this process to proceed in an orderly fashion." She turned her gaze to Chief Callahan. "Chief, you may begin." Callahan rose, adjusting his tie before stepping forward. He spoke in a measured, authoritative tone, clearly attempting to frame the issue as one of law and order. "Thank you, Mayor Everly," he began, his eyes sweeping over the council members before landing on the crowd. "This is not about charity, nor is it about community service. This is about maintaining respect for the law. Ms. Carter, despite her good intentions, has been operating without the necessary permits. Her actions have disrupted the order of this town, drawing unnecessary attention, and creating a spectacle that undermines the authority of our local institutions." He paused, his gaze drifting to Jasmine, his expression stern. "Allowing exceptions to the rules sets a dangerous precedent. If we permit one person to ignore the law, what's to stop others from doing the same? Rules exist for a reason, and it is my responsibility as Chief of Police to ensure those rules are followed. I am simply upholding my duty to this community." As he finished, a ripple of discontent passed through the audience. People exchanged glances, some whispering to one another. The words Callahan had chosen, disruption, spectacle, undermine, made it clear that he saw Jasmine's actions as a threat to his authority, rather than an act of goodwill. Mayor Everly turned to Jasmine. "Ms. Carter, you may now present your side of the story." Jasmine took a deep breath, steadying herself as she rose to her feet. She could feel the weight of the crowd's expectations, the quiet encouragement of the people who had come to support her. She met her father's gaze, drawing strength from his calm, unwavering presence. She stepped forward, her heart pounding, but her voice was clear and strong as she began to speak. "Thank you, Mayor Everly, and thank you to the council for allowing me to share my story." She paused, looking out over the crowd, meeting the eyes of her neighbors, her friends, her supporters. "My name is Jasmine Carter. I am 16 years old, and I set up a lemonade stand to raise money for our local community center and to help provide health care for children who can't afford it." She glanced over at Chief Callahan, meeting his gaze without fear. "I didn't start this lemonade stand to break the law or to challenge authority. I started it because I believe that each of us has a responsibility to make the world a better place. I wanted to make a difference, to help people in my community, and I thought a lemonade stand would be a simple way to do that." Jasmine looked back at the council, her voice steady. When Chief Callahan told me I needed a permit, I didn't argue. I went to town hall with my dad, and we applied for the permit. I followed the rules because I respect the law and the people who serve this community. But what I don't understand is why I was targeted in the first place, why my lemonade stand was seen as a problem when all I was trying to do was help. A quiet murmur of agreement swept through the crowd, and Jasmine could see people nodding, their expressions supportive. She continued, her voice growing stronger as she spoke from the heart. I understand that rules are important, that they help keep order. But sometimes we need to look at the reason behind those rules. If enforcing a rule means stopping someone from doing something good, then maybe it's time to reconsider how we apply those rules. This isn't just about my lemonade stand anymore. This is about the right to make a positive impact in our community without fear of being shut down or intimidated. She glanced at her father, then at the council members, her eyes bright with determination. Oakwood is a town that has always been about family, about helping one another, about standing up for what's right. I want my lemonade stand to represent those values, to be a place where people can come together and support one another. And I hope that, as a community, we can find a way to work together instead of trying to tear each other down. Jasmine took a step back, her heart racing as she returned to her seat. The room was silent for a moment, as if everyone was absorbing the weight of her words. Then, slowly, people began to clap. The applause started softly but grew louder, filling the room as people rose to their feet in a standing ovation. Jasmine felt a surge of pride and gratitude, overwhelmed by the show of support. Chief Callahan's face was set in a grim expression, his jaw clenched as he watched the crowd's reaction. He knew he had lost the support of the people, but his pride refused to let him admit defeat. He sat back down, his expression one of simmering resentment as he waited for the council's response. Mayor Everly allowed the applause to continue for a moment before raising her hand to quiet the room. She looked around at the council members, who exchanged nods and murmurs before she turned back to address the room. Thank you, Miss Carter, for sharing your story with us. You have reminded us of the values that make Oakwood the town we all love: compassion, community, and the courage to stand up for what's right. She paused, her expression thoughtful. The council has heard both sides of this matter, and we will now deliberate on a decision. The council members leaned in, speaking quietly among themselves. The room was tense, filled with anticipation as people waited to hear the outcome. Jasmine felt her father's hand on her shoulder, a reassuring presence that grounded her in the moment. After a few minutes, Mayor Everly cleared her throat and addressed the room once more. In light of the testimony we have heard today, and in recognition of the overwhelming support for Ms. Carter's cause, the council has decided to uphold her permit to operate her lemonade stand. Furthermore, we will be waiving any additional fees associated with the permit in recognition of the charitable nature of her work. The room erupted in applause, cheers echoing off the walls as people celebrated the council's decision. Jasmine felt a rush of relief, a weight lifting from her shoulders as she realized that her stand and her message had been validated. She hugged her father tightly, the pride in his eyes reflecting the strength and resilience he had instilled in her. But the mayor wasn't finished. She raised her hand, and the room gradually fell silent again. However, she continued, her tone serious, we have also taken note of the concerns raised regarding the manner in which this situation was handled by our police department. In response, the council will be initiating a formal review of our town's policies on community engagement and law enforcement practices. We believe that this incident has highlighted the need for a more compassionate approach, one that reflects the values of Oakwood and fosters trust between our citizens and those who serve them. Chief Callahan's face darkened, his expression filled with barely concealed fury. The implications were clear. His actions were no longer beyond scrutiny, and his grip on authority was slipping. He glanced around the room, but the faces of the townspeople held no sympathy for him. His reputation, once unchallenged, was now tainted by his unwillingness to listen, to adapt, to understand. As the hearing adjourned, people surrounded Jasmine, congratulating her, shaking her hand, and thanking her for her bravery. She felt overwhelmed by the support, the love, the unity that had blossomed from her simple act of kindness. She had not only kept her stand but had also inspired a movement, a call for change that resonated throughout Oakwood. Standing in the midst of her supporters, Jasmine caught sight of Officer Green and Sergeant Nils, who nodded at her, their faces reflecting both respect and admiration. They, too, had been impacted by her courage, and Jasmine knew that Oakwood's police department was already beginning to change from within. As the crowd began to disperse, Jasmine looked up at her father, her heart swelling with gratitude and pride. "We did it, Dad," she said softly, the weight of her victory sinking in. Marcus smiled, his eyes filled with pride. "No, Jasmine, you did it. You showed this town what it means to stand up for what's right. And you reminded all of us of the power of a single voice." Jasmine took a deep breath, feeling the full weight of what she had accomplished. She had not only defended her right to make a difference, but had also sparked a movement, a wave of change that would shape Oakwood for years to come. And as she looked around at the faces of her community, she knew that this was only the beginning. Together, they had proven that justice, compassion, and courage could prevail. Together, they would continue to stand, united, for a better future. A legacy of change. In the weeks that followed the hearing, life in Oakwood began to change in ways Jasmine had never imagined. Her lemonade stand had not only survived, but had become a beloved symbol in the community, a reminder of the power of resilience and unity. People continued to visit her stand daily, not only for the lemonade but to support her cause and to be a part of something meaningful. She was no longer just a teenager selling lemonade. She was a catalyst for change, a young woman who had ignited a spark in her town. Every day, Jasmine poured lemonade with a smile, feeling the warmth and gratitude of her community. Children who once viewed her as just another high school student now looked up to her as a role model. Families came by to thank her for standing up, to tell her how her courage had inspired them to speak out about issues they had kept quiet about for too long. For the first time, Oakwood felt like a true community, one that was open to dialogue, to change, and to growth. Jasmine's story continued to gain attention, and soon it reached the desks of journalists, activists, and public figures beyond Oakwood. She received letters from people all over the state, teachers, parents, and young people who felt inspired by her story. She received invitations to speak at schools and community centers, where she shared her journey, emphasizing the importance of standing up for what is right and using one's voice to make a difference. With each appearance, Jasmine found herself growing more confident, more empowered, her once small voice now carrying across cities. Meanwhile, Oakwood's town council, true to their word, had launched a formal review of the police department's community engagement practices. They held town hall meetings to gather feedback from citizens, listening to stories of past grievances and suggestions for a more compassionate approach. Officers like Sergeant Mills and Officer Green attended these meetings, offering their support for reforms and advocating for a renewed relationship between the police and the community. Chief Callahan, on the other hand, found himself under increasing scrutiny. His heavy-handed methods, once accepted without question, were now openly criticized. His authority had been weakened, not just by the council's decision, but by the shifting tide of public opinion. The people of Oakwood had seen the impact of his actions, and they were no longer willing to tolerate his authoritarian approach. Rumors circulated that the council was considering a leadership change within the department, and Callahan's resentment simmered, but he knew there was little he could do. His attempts to intimidate Jasmine had backfired, exposing his insecurities and isolating him from the very people he claimed to serve. Despite the community's support for Jasmine, she continued to face occasional backlash. Anonymous letters appeared in her mailbox, accusing her of stirring up trouble and challenging authority. Some people whispered that she was being used by adults with hidden agendas, or that her actions were ungrateful. Jasmine's heart ached whenever she read these hurtful words, but she refused to let them deter her. With each letter of hate, She reminded herself of the many more letters of support, the faces of children who looked up to her, and the countless people who had thanked her for being a voice for change. One morning, as Jasmine prepared her lemonade stand for another day, she noticed a familiar car pull up across the street. Her heart skipped a beat as Chief Callahan stepped out, his face stern and unreadable. She took a deep breath, bracing herself for whatever confrontation he might bring. The people nearby paused, watching as the chief approached her stand. "Good morning, Chief," Jasmine said politely, determined to maintain her composure. Callahan looked at her, his expression inscrutable. He glanced around at the people watching them, aware that he was under a microscope, and then turned his attention back to her. After a moment's silence, he finally spoke, his voice low and controlled. "I came here to acknowledge your success," he said slowly, the words seeming to weigh heavily on him. "It seems that you've managed to rally this town in a way I never anticipated." Jasmine was taken aback. She hadn't expected him to acknowledge her efforts, let alone admit to her impact. She nodded, her voice calm. "Thank you, Chief. I just wanted to help my community." Callahan's gaze hardened slightly, as if he struggled with his next words. "There's a lot you don't understand about authority, young lady. A lot that you'll learn as you get older. But I suppose I underestimated you." He shifted uncomfortably, as though fighting to maintain his pride. "In any case, I wanted to let you know that I'll be stepping down from my position. The council and I came to a mutual agreement. Seems they think this town needs a different kind of leadership." The air around them felt charged, the weight of his admission sinking in. Jasmine met his gaze, understanding the complex emotions behind his words. She felt no need to gloat or to revel in his downfall. Instead, she simply nodded, acknowledging the shift with quiet respect. "I hope that whoever takes your place will lead with compassion," she said softly. "Oakwood deserves that." Callahan gave her a curt nod, then turned and walked away, leaving her with a sense of closure. The man who had once tried to intimidate her had finally acknowledged her strength, even if he would never fully understand the depth of her impact. She watched him go, feeling a strange mixture of relief and sadness. She hadn't set out to ruin anyone's career, but she knew that real change often came at a cost. As news of Callahan's resignation spread, the town buzzed with excitement and hope. The council appointed an interim police chief, a woman named Rachel Torres, known for her integrity and community-focused approach. Chief Torres immediately made it clear that her priority was rebuilding trust between the police department and the citizens of Oakwood. She met with community leaders, attended town events, and encouraged officers to engage with residents in positive ways. Under her leadership, the police department began a slow but steady transformation, one that reflected the values of the community it served. With the arrival of Chief Torres, Jasmine's story continued to serve as a reminder of the power of resilience and the impact of a single voice. The police department began a series of workshops and training sessions focused on de-escalation, empathy, and community outreach. Officers who had once been distant became familiar faces at neighborhood events, getting to know the people they were sworn to protect. Oakwood was becoming a model of change, a town that had faced its flaws and emerged stronger. Jasmine's lemonade stand became a permanent fixture in Oakwood, but it was no longer just about selling lemonade. People came to her stand to talk about the issues that mattered to them, to share their stories, and to find solidarity in a community that had once been divided. The money she raised continued to support the community center and other local charities, but now her stand served an even deeper purpose. It was a place where people could come together, where they could find hope and connection. One summer evening, as Jasmine was closing up her stand, Marcus approached her with a proud smile. He wrapped his arm around her shoulders, his gaze filled with pride and love. "You've changed this town, Jasmine," he said quietly. "You've made Oakwood a better place." Jasmine looked up at him, her heart swelling with gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you, Dad. You taught me to be brave." Marcus shook his head, his eyes glistening. "No, Jasmine. You had that bravery inside you all along. I just helped you find it." They stood together in the golden light of the setting sun, watching as people passed by, waving and smiling. Jasmine knew that this was only the beginning of her journey, that there were more challenges ahead, more causes to stand up for. But she also knew that she was not alone. She had her father, her community, and a newfound confidence that would carry her forward. As she packed up her stand for the night, she thought about the legacy she had created, not just for herself, but for Oakwood. Her story had become a part of the town's history, a reminder that even the smallest acts of courage could inspire profound change. She had proven that a single voice, no matter how young or small, could make a difference. And as she walked home with her father, hand in hand, she felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that she had made her mark on the world. Over time, Jasmine's story continued to resonate, inspiring others far beyond Oakwood. She received letters from young people across the country who had read about her in newspapers, seen her interviews, or heard about her from friends. Some told her about their own struggles, their own battles against injustice, and how her courage had given them the strength to keep fighting. Jasmine responded to each letter with words of encouragement, knowing that her journey had become a beacon for others. Years later, Jasmine would look back on that summer as the turning point in her life, the moment when she had discovered her purpose. She would go on to pursue her dreams of becoming a doctor, fueled by the same compassion that had driven her to set up that lemonade stand. And as she treated her patients, listened to their stories, and helped them heal, she would carry with her the lessons she had learned in Oakwood. The importance of resilience, the power of unity, and the unwavering belief in justice. Oakwood would never forget Jasmine Carter, the girl with the lemonade stand who had stood up to authority, and in doing so, had transformed her community. Her legacy lived on in the town's renewed spirit, in the changes that had taken root, and in the countless lives she had touched. She had shown Oakwood, and the world, that true power lay not in force, but in kindness, in courage, and in the strength of a single voice willing to stand up for what was right.